Yeah, good, good. We are 1 week before Mint, so we are all hands on deck. But yeah, feeling good. Yeah, really feeling good about everything. Really excited to go into the final week.
Exciting, exciting. And look, I see you driving the Martian Premier League account there. Who might you be? Is that Oriole?
That is Oriel, or you can call me my actual name, which is Corey. We are a
Corey, you
docked
got it.
team, so you know that we can dispense with the nicknames, I guess.
No worries at all there, Corey. Well, you know what? We appreciate you hanging out with us. Look, and of course to the rest of your team as well. A very, very big welcome. Look, why don't we kick it off? Of course, we've set our GMs. Why don't we run some quick intros here? Why don't each of you take a moment to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess if we get Eleanor up as well, if you request to speak Eleanor, and then we've got all four of the founding team here. But Tom, why don't I let you kick off first?
Thanks, Corey. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom. Background in sort of media and entertainment. Worked at Warner Brothers for quite a long time, and now working gaming and esports. Really happy to be here and talk about the Martian Premier League, which I think we've done quite a lot of over the last couple of months. But as Corey mentioned, going into the final stretch now and sort of feeling pretty positive about everything. So happy to be here, and thanks so much for having us. Eleanor, do you want to go next? Oh no, you're not quite up yet. Maybe Adam, you go next.
Hey, sure. Product manager at Edge, so working on the graph, but I've been in Web3 building apps on Ethereum for a couple of years now, and then I guess worked on USDC, the stablecoin at Circle back in sort of 2018, 2019. Built a bunch of sort of NFT projects and working on quite a lot of developer tools, and so I'm working on, I guess, smart contracts, apps, all of this, like I guess the stuff behind the scenes. So that's what I'm focusing on with 7 days to go.
Awesome. And Eleanor, if you want to jump up and request to speak, I assume you're on mobile as well. But while you're doing that, hi everyone. I'm Corey. Started my career actually working with Tom and Adam in some different roles, and spent the last kind of 10 to 15 years advising venture capital and private equity on technology investment and growth and strategy. I work at a professional services firm, although not for long, as we'll be focusing on this. That'll be coming to a close pretty soon. Spend most of my time in kind of commercial and growth over the last few years, and got into NFTs right at the start of 2021 and have been hooked since, and never knew I could be in so many discords until now.
It certainly does. It certainly is that way, isn't it, Corey? Welcome. Well, you don't need a welcome in, but as you know, it's an all-consuming rabbit hole, right? And we're just all here. We're just all here along for the ride. Poop over in the Metaverse HQ seat there. How's it going with bringing Eleanor up?
I got you right here. Fantastic.
There we go. GM, Eleanor.
Hi there. I'm Eleanor, and I'm doing the creative lead on MPL, and my background is in graphic design and art direction. Spent a lot of time working with Tom on all things to do with Harry Potter and Wizarding World. And now very excited to be here. Can't believe we're only 7 days away from Mint, and really excited to be working on this completely different project.
That's amazing, and it's incredible to have all of you with us. Once again, thank you all for your time and hanging out with us. So I suppose this one's just a general question for the team. Let's, kick it off nice and easy, and we'll get a little, we'll get into the detail and the nitty gritty a little later. First of all, why don't we get a high level overview of what your project's about? Tell us about the Martian Premier League.
Well, happy to give a brief overview, then maybe the others will jump in with a bit more detail. But really, the Martian Premier League, we set out to do three things, really. We quite artistic and creative as a team, and wanted to make some of the best sort of profile picture art that's in the space. If you look at all of the sneak peeks and drops that we've done so far, you'll see, like, I think, quite a distinctive style across human characters and Martian characters. Quite a lot of detail and depth in those subcategories, and I'm sure Eleanor will talk a lot about how we came to arrive on the art style in due course. We also wanted to make a fun game, so I know we'll get into that, and you guys will have lots of great questions and sort of prod on the detail of our game. But as an overview, it's a football manager or soccer manager game where players can own players or own teams, loan players to form teams, compete in leagues, rise up the table, and ultimately, hopefully, win the Martian Premier League. And thirdly, we wanted to create some sort of story and narrative building. You know, we've worked on large franchises where storytelling and creativity is at the heart of those big worlds. And we thought there was an opportunity to do something where there was a narrative thread through lots of different entertainment products, so games, narrative fiction, and a broader world that could all come together. So really, the MPL was an attempt to do those three things: world building, fantastic art, and great gameplay. And yeah, the Martian Premier League is the result of those three aims.
Those are some noble aims, and thanks for giving us a bit of a rundown there. You touched on story, and we understand that that's very important to each of you, and that world building plays a pivotal role within the storytelling. So, just generally, what are some of your favorite worlds which have been created, and what makes them special to each of you?
Well, maybe I can start and maybe just give a bit of a view about why we think storytelling is so important and is particularly important in the NFT space. I think that stories are the things that people really do fall in love with. It's true for absolutely everything that we do in whether we fall in love with games, whether we fall in love with books or movies. We fall in love with the kind of world and narrative that sits around it. It's very natural. And maybe not all NFT projects have necessarily kind of focused on that, thinking about that kind of long-term depth of an emotional resonance that sort of comes from building a world and telling stories and giving something people really want to dive into. I guess at a personal level, before handing over to the rest of the team, I've played games my whole life, and they've been really important kind of worlds to me. And you'll see in our white paper we talk about how the Mars universe, which really the Martian Premier League is really only the first expression of it. We talk about the Mars universe as being our version of Azeroth or Tamriel or the Wasteland. Games like as you say, World of Warcraft or Elder Scrolls or Fallout. Those kind of rich, deep worlds that that people have constantly kind of dove into and played through and understood. And for us, the Martian Premier League is, at least for me, the Martian Premier League is the starting zone of Azeroth, maybe in World of Warcraft, where you first started, the first thing you do. And the rest of the world is really for us to tell and explore in combination with the community. And, we think this is an important focus for us because we think that we look at this project on a 3 to 5 year time horizon. And if you're not telling a story and building a world, it just won't last that long, as people are not excited and want to dive into it. But let me hand over to maybe Eleanor to sort of talk about a few of the things that have inspired her and kind of the worlds and so forth.
Well, I love this. This is such a fun question, and I think we're quite similar probably as a group, in that we all do have like different worlds and different stories that we love. Obviously, Potter was always going to be like a big kind of chunk in my life. Like it had a big impact on my life as stories go. But I kind of grew up loving stuff like Discworld and like Doctor Who, and then kind of recently in the last
couple of years, especially since lockdown, I got really into Star Trek, and I watched basically all of TNG twice during lockdown, and I really valued having that world to escape into, and I love that it's a franchise that is just still alive. There's so much, it's such a rich and amazing world with this amazing heritage as well, and I think it's an amazing example of some of the stuff that Tom was talking about earlier in terms of the the cross channel storytelling. So there's just, I love the look and feel of it, so it's definitely something that I'm really into right now.
I do love you mentioned Pratchett there. I've had many debates between people around which wizard is the greatest, and Rincewind is my number one all time.
I think Rincewind's got to be in like top 3 wizard list.
Well, I'll go and maybe pick up on a point that Eleanor made. Potter was a big deal for me as a kid. I loved those stories, and then going to work in the franchise for such a long time kind of gave me an appreciation of that world, maybe on the other side of it, sort of on the business and creative side of it, and just to see the amount of care and attention that every expression of that world was made through, whether it's a theme park or a new film or a new sort of offshoot story, and that really inspired me, actually, that whole experience, kind of seeing the amount of care and dedication that even a massive franchise like that takes with every tiny detail. And I think try to take a lot of that spirit of being a fan and then being a part owner in that franchise into creating the MPL, taking that love and craft. And so, yeah, seeing it from both sides, I think that's a world that I've loved in many different ways.
That's fantastic. And look, as someone who loves stories and worlds, it's great hearing you guys talk through these examples, because it's really telling that you find it important as well. So that's great.
Yeah, I love it. I love to hear it. And Tom and Eleanor, I'm a big Potter fan as well. So it's actually incredible to see. It's incredible to see people who've actually taken the time to build that world actually come into Web3 and build here. It's just inspirational. I do love it. So actually talking about worlds, let's dive in, right? So in the Martian Premiere League, there's a Professor Gaffer, right? And Professor Gaffer is starting a Premier League because his favorite soccer team, I believe, has fallen at the hands of a disreputable villain. So it seems. Web3, as you know, is all about community engagement, as you probably know. I'm sure you're all well living in the Discord at this point in time. How do you see your storyline with, the Martian Premier League and, Professor Gaffer developing and unfolding over time? And how do you plan to involve your community in the story?
That's such a good question. And I think something that we have really enjoyed about the creative process in Web3 is how close the community is to the creative process. We've been dropping sneak peeks all over the shop, as anyone that's following us knows. But we've actually been co-creating some of our art and our traits with our community. We've run competitions and got feedback from them on what they'd like to see in the human and Martian characters, just as a small example. So to take that question on its head, we are creating narrative fiction at the moment. We're working on storylines and working actually on a fiction product that we're thinking we will release after the mint. Working with some great creators that we know and have worked on big franchises. And I think that's because we know that making stories and expanding the world is a proper process. You can't just make it up on the fly. And we've been investing a lot of time, even pre-mint, in making sure we got the right team on board to tell that story. So although we're hiring some great professionals and we've got a plan there, the idea is to start to drip feed some of that origin story and some of the some of the story of Gaffer post landing on Mars, drip feed that out, but also get feedback from people and start to take their view on where the story goes, and hopefully inspire some of the community to make their own offshoots, their own fan art, their own strands of stories. You know, when Ellen and I were working on the Potter franchise, one of the things that I think we found a bit frustrating was the sort of gap between the fans and the creative process. So actually spent quite a lot of time sort of shutting down really kind of fan activity and non-official canon. And actually in this world, there is obviously much less of a line between the kind of central creative process and then the thoughts and feelings and creative process of the owners and the consumers of the NFTs. So yeah, that's something really excited to build out, and I think our philosophy is, you know, in the central team, hire the best people we can and develop that story in the best way we can, but then involve the community and have them sort of build upon it, and hopefully something special is created through that interplay.
I think one of the things that sort of makes that possible in this style project is the fact that, you know, it is a small team, and if we see something like, if we see ideas bubbling up in the Discord and like themes sort of reoccurring in the fan art channel, for example, then there's nothing to stop us sort of nodding at each other, going, "This is cool. Like that's something that we should explore." And if we there's no those barriers that Tom's describing that you have in a sort of more traditional entertainment franchise just don't exist for us in this project, because the only people that have to get out of our own way is us. So that's what's really exciting, is that can kind of trigger an idea and inspire an idea. And I found being in the Discord and just seeing what people make and seeing where people's minds go, it's just been so inspiring. Like every day of this project, it's been such an amazing experience. It's been really fun.
That's really interesting. And I might just jump ahead, Vig, and ask a question we had, which kind of aligns with what Ellen was talking to here. So with the evolution of the story and the community involvement, is there going to be an overarching brand which everything will continue to funnel up into as the Mars universe evolves? Or can the community kind of take this in any direction they really want?
I think with the community can do anything they like with the characters that are in the universe, but I think we will have a central story, a central brand, and we'll try and make narrative that inspires those offshoots that we talked about. And I think this is when you're trying to do narrative fiction and the creation of entertainment products in a Web3 environment, there is this really interesting interplay between the center, the team at the heart of the project that people have sort of bought a token of, and then the sort of fans and consumers and holders themselves. And I think we're really dedicated as a team to trying to make that interplay as sort of coherent as possible, provide as much inspiration as possible for great offshoots, but also do the work ourselves. So I don't know if you feel that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I don't think it's necessarily an easy one-word answer to that question. But we're really conscious of the tension that you're sort of nodding to there.
Yeah, no, that's great. So the way I'm hearing that is you're going to have a core narrative, a core world built around the NFTs and the characters that you guys are creating, producing, providing, and then the community's free to kind of take those assets, take those products and build on them.
Exactly, yeah. But without being lazy about the core, keep creating, keep making, keep pushing the story on, keep doing the work, the hard creative work of telling Gaffer's story and our overall Mars story, but yeah, sort of sitting back and being in awe of what the community can produce. That's the sort of plan.
I wonder. Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, It's so bad. I was only going to say,
You talk.
Adam, I wonder if it's sort of worth you sort of reflecting on, because obviously we spent a lot of time when we kind of wrote our principles about, sort of in general, not just in the creative process, but, Web3 is designed to be an open ecosystem, and, that not only applies to what Tom's saying in that kind of broader creative sense, but it also applies in a kind of development sense as well, in sort of following that principle through.
A lot of what excites me about building in Web3 is that sort of permissionless community innovation, composability, like however you want to term it. The fact that you can build on top of things, you can like extend things, you can make things interact, you can like innovate on models, take things, put them together. Like that's a lot of the stuff that gets me really excited when I see others doing it. Thinking about like how I can bring that into what I'm building, but then equally like taking like being inspired when you see others taking what you're doing and maybe applying it in ways that you wouldn't have expected. And I think that's actually what gives this space the edge over traditional media, where sort of thing everything has to go through a central process. Like I think where a lot of the nuance and a lot of the like interesting questions are on like getting the right balance between like the efficiency that you get from like having like a really focused central team, but what like also like fostering that like community involvement, like and like substantial and real contribution. I think it's not an easy thing to get right, but I think it can be so powerful when you do.
That's really interesting, and it's funny being in this space. I come from IT background and the introduction of Agile and the manifesto and all that sort of thing, and I just feel like in this space that was what that was kind of a little bit what they were going for, and a lot of that's filtered through. It's the same sort of mindset, same sort of people. It's just taken like 4 steps further, so it's great to see the creative process in here.
I agree with you, Mick. It's like iteration, but really, really fast. We breaking things all the time. No, but the Martian Premier League, of course, not breaking things. Question for you, actually, Eleanor. The profile pictures, the PFP is being minted initially, right? What people are initially going to mint. They've got an incredible style, right? I believe done by Rupert Gruber. Will the other assets in the Mars universe follow the same theme, or will we be seeing varying and different art as the world evolves? What's the direction?
I think that this is another familiar challenge that is definitely kind of popped up in traditional franchise world as well, where you kind of have to sort of have some core values, maybe some core graphic language that kind of builds that umbrella brand and has that MPL feel that I'm hoping we'll be able to create as our products mature. But then also I think you do have to have flexibility for the visual expression to be the right one and suitable for the right channel that you're talking in. So that's a waffly way of saying I think there probably will be different visual expressions in different mediums, but hopefully there'll be enough common threads for it to kind of all pull together and still feel like it's an MPL story or an MPL product that you're seeing. So yes, like just also take a moment to give props to Rupert, who is our amazing artist, whose style we were so drawn to and we've been really so lucky to work with. It's really he's really been such an amazing part of this team, and absolutely has brought so much of his own hand and his own style to everything that you've kind of seen from us so far.
Oh, that's awesome, and I do like it. Do like what we've been seeing. Mick, you had a question.
Yeah, so the white paper mentions wrapping of other collections for use in your ecosystems. Kind of a one-liner. Definitely perked my attention. So I wanted to understand, how will you manage that in alignment with the law, and how will you weave that into the storytelling of the universe, bringing in these other collections and assets?
I wonder if I might put Corey on the spot for that one, perhaps.
I don't know if Corey's
Okay.
dropped,
Oh.
but I guess along the lines of stuff I was talking about around composability, this is again one of the things that I think is exciting, because if you've got all these standard compliant NFTs being created by different teams, if those all sort of live in their own walled gardens, it feels like you're leaving a lot of potential on the table. On the sort of legal, like, ownership side of things, like I guess that will happen a bit on a case by case basis. You do see a lot of NFTs where sort of ownership of the NFT grants the user a lot of ability to do things, but I think even outside of that, what we're really just giving people access to, NFT holders access to, is gameplay that they can then associate with their like tokens, which they sort of demonstrably own on chain. So so I'm sure there are, like, we'll obviously have to think about it, but and do stuff in the right way. But I think in terms of just giving people the opportunity to play within the game, feels like that's not going to be too big a hurdle. And it feels like it's just such a fundamental part of like Web3 gaming and fun that that like I think we'll look back on things which like are done in a bit more of a sort of closed loop system in future as being like how did we think that was going to work? It's so sort of antithetical to the space overall.
So thinking
Yeah.
of it as if you have like an open brand and you're bringing that into this environment, so you need to facilitate everything that's already there.
I actually just want to tug on that thread just a little bit more, if that's okay, Adam. So, I completely agree with you, and I'm a big fan of interoperability myself. I suppose I'm interested in your thoughts, and of course, you don't have to give anything away, and I don't want to stitch you up either, as we're in this live setting. But how do you envision that sort of working? What are some ways in which the Martian Premier League might potentially involve other collections in the future? Let's say, for example, if somebody has a cool cat, for example, could the cool cats one day have a I don't know, have a team, take part in the Martian Premier League? Is that within the realm of possibility?
Yeah, sure. So if you think about like the building blocks which we are working on, obviously, like in their first iteration, they're going to be pretty tied to the kind of things that we need. So that's like, okay, given your character, like how do you essentially generate players? Like, what do those players need? Those players need a bunch of skills. Those players then need to be able to be assembled into teams in some kind of way. Those like teams need to be able to play in leagues. They need to have a place to play, etc., etc., etc. Like a lot of those things are sort of like going to be sort of MPL specific, but actually a lot of the like the actual pieces are pretty generic. So given that the input like coming from like the characters on L1 is essentially in ERC 721 on Ethereum mainnet, it just so happens that at the start we're going to be we'd be focused on the Martian Premier League contract, but like there's no reason that we can't like think ahead a little bit and say, okay, actually we want that minting contract on L2 to be aware of like token addresses, not just like token address, and then like maybe over time we could work out that we'd like a given collection like X to also have access to be able to sort of mint and create players in a certain way. And like we obviously are like incredibly mindful of the fact that the sort of Martian, the MPL holders on mainnet and like the owners of those tokens, essentially our community, our number one priority. that composability is super exciting, and the ability to open up that sort of player creation interface to like other contracts. So again, it's just like an input where like if those contracts are accessible to other collections to like create players, those players then immediately exist in the Martian Premier League. At which point, like, you might want to think about how they get classified differently, or what other like different things that they do, whether they start at a different point or whatever. But like, all of the stuff should be sufficiently generic that other people can feed in, and I'm also super open to other people taking our building blocks and forking them and running them in parallel, like in certain cases where that makes sense too, because I think that's just the nature of the space.
I think this is just really important for us. It's a core principle of what we're doing. We want to do something that is super cool, and we want to reward our, Genesis holders, of course, in the universe. But we also want to be contributors and innovators to the space with that open ecosystem. If we're not doing that, then we may as well set up a Web2 company, right, and just lock everything down and not and just kind of create that closed ecosystem again. That's not the ethos of Web3. It's all not the ethos of this team. So I think it'll warm Adam's heart to hear the importance of kind of public good, as it were, in kind of what's coming out of this, both in this and also kind of future expressions of the universe beyond the Martian Premier League that will exist on chain.
I think it is definitely a challenge for projects within the space at the moment when they think about this exact thing. How do they broaden and encompass and introduce other collections, and what impact does it have on them and the other collections? So MBHQ, we have a lot of on-chain maxis, myself included, who see value in ownership of IP and complete ownership of what you're buying. How is that being handled here, whether you're looking at the Genesis characters or the players within the Premier League itself that get minted, or anything in the future? Can you talk to how ownership is going to work for consumers?
Yeah, well, let me start, and in terms of that. So much like the intention is that our kind of characters and so forth will have a license very similar to Bored Ape, for example. So the kind of ability to commercially use your NFT and however you so wish to use it. And then in terms of gameplay, the intention is to put as much on chain as is humanly possible. Me and Adam were having that kind of debate today about some kind of novel uses of. I'm just going to completely butcher Adam now, and he can tell me how wrong I am later. Using kind of batches and so forth of transactions to make sure it's not. It's not kind of distracting from the gameplay, so you can kind of do it all at once rather than having to do each single thing. Because we are user experience is very important and critical as much as on chain. And Adam, early on in the project, Adam sort of said, if we're not doing as much as possible on chain, we're not contributing to innovation, and that's what we want to do, and that's why we're doing that. And then I think, as we think about the Mars universe more broadly, to your kind of point around, what do you own, what's in the NFT, intellectual property, we hope, as we sort of, Tom kind of mentioned, the kind of origin story and so forth, or the founding myth of the universe, which we're working with some, genuinely legendary creators for, and everything we talked about right at the start of this space around world building, there will be characters of that who, may well be kind of used in that kind of, traditional media expansion. And, obviously there'll be associated royalties if they're going to be used because you own the commercial license to it. So, we very much are kind of following the footsteps of, people before us and how to think about that. And that is, really important to us. We want that alignment between the community and what we're doing as much as possible. And, I think as a kind of company, we also want to be supportive if, people want to build derivatives and so forth. We want to be supportive of that kind of stuff as well. Again, very much, open. We want to approach this in a kind of as open a way as possible, because we think that, it's not just an ethos thing. It's also about driving innovation, which is sort of important holistically for the space as well.
I love it. And just absolute absolute respect to you and your team for having, approached the space in this way. And, we've been here for a while. And for anyone who's been here for a while, you'll know that there's, different organizations and institutions approach the Web3 space differently. And at the manner in which you engage the space, matters, and people notice. And so, good on you. And I love that. On chain, let's go. So what's your team's long-term approach? Talk to us about, what's sort of the long game here for brand building, the Martian Premier League and Web3. You've talked about, I suppose the Premier League, sorry, I should say specifically, being sort of the first expression of this. What's the long-term approach here in Web3?
Yeah, great question. Maybe let me start and probably maybe reiterate for a few people, and probably something we spend a lot of time talking with the MBHQ team about, who I have to say are the most rigorous interviewers of projects that they'll do collaborations with, which is huge respect for. I've never feel like I've been grilled so much, but in a good way. I think one of the, when we think about the kind of brand, like, why are we, before we get into it, why are we capable of building it is kind of question number one. Because, anyone can, give you a kind of good spiel. This is a uniquely experienced team in Web3, like genuinely uniquely experienced. Former creative director of Harry Potter, Adam, who worked on the launch of USDC, the stable coin. Tom, obviously, with his background at Warner Brothers and Potter and esports. I spent my life advising venture capital and private equity. We're fully doxed. We have all been working 10, 15 years in traditional media, in crypto building, in investing, in franchise development. Our artists' most recent collab was Marvel, with Rupert. So we have assembled a team that is capable of doing it, and we have doxed ourselves because when people hit that mint button, I want them to know that the team that they are choosing to, put some ETH toward is a team that, can not only deliver the kind of vision we're going to talk about, but it's a team that, can pivot and adapt and, and build even in adversity. Because we know the space goes up and down. there's pros and cons. It feels like a roller coaster daily, never mind day to day. So I think that's the first sort of answer to your question. I think it is about the team is of a uniquely high quality. I think the second thing in terms of the vision is, firstly, we are, as we think of kind of the product roadmap, as we kind of continue to expand the Martian Premier League, that's obviously going to take up a lot of our energy. As we kind of move, pretty quickly post-mint to the sort of training and development of players, and then a little bit after that into the kind of broader game engine and leagues. But, we are, as we kind of think about the brand, we are thinking around two ways in terms of its development. One is, further blockchain gaming, kind of on-chain. We want to do something novel and innovative. That doesn't necessarily mean we're sort of anti-gaming per se, but I think we like Web3 for a reason of everything we've been talking about. So how do we do something cool there, or more cool in kind of that, and is expand the universe? And we were all going back and forward a while back about the kind of vision document of the game, and what more don't we know about the universe? Why are the Martians there? Why are they underground? Who is this enemy of GAFA? All things we could explore through different kind of gaming engines. And then the second thing is non-blockchain related things. So it is the traditional media, the stuff we're talking about. It is kind of narrative fiction, it is TV, etc. I know a lot of projects say that because I've heard them, and I probably have minted them and maybe been disappointed. But this is a team that actually knows that world. Like, we have worked in it for decades between us combined. So, this is something where, we're not, we're not promising any of that in the roadmap or anything, but, the intention is to expand it through, both Web3 and traditional media as we continue to tell the story as much as possible. So I know that may be a little bit high level, because we know that the community is going to be important in guiding some of those decisions. But hopefully that gives you, I think, the kind of confidence people should have in the kind of vision we have for this on a 3 to 5 years. And I'm leaving as a partner of a kind of consulting firm to come and do this because I am super passionate about doing it. This team is whole super passionate about doing it, and this is the kind of stuff that I want to do for at the very least the next 3 to 5 years as we build it out.
Love to see it.
I do really love hearing the answers to the questions so far. They're so complete. It's fantastic. But we've been talking about the world for a while now, and I think what we need to do is hone in on the game specifically. So, Martian Premier League, as a game within your ecosystem, can you give us a quick rundown on the core gameplay mechanics? Just kind of talk us through what people will be doing inside the game when they start.
Okay, maybe I'll take a brief overview, and then I'm sure you'll have questions. We've really chunked the game into 3 phases. First phase is you'll get your Genesis characters, of course, in 7 days' time. Let's not forget that. They will turn into players on an L2 chain. The first phase of the game will be a player-centric sort of training phase where you'll get to know your player, the skills it has, and be able to improve them via some mechanics that we can get into. Second phase is we're going to sort of beta test the first gameplay mechanics, so arrange players into a random sort of knockout competition, so kind of randomly assigned teams, a huge knockout, and there'll be a first team winner of the inaugural Martian Cup. And then the third phase is really where the MPL proper begins, and that's where the opportunity to own the first 1,000 teams, and then team owners will be able to recruit players. Either they'll own the players or they'll go into the Martian Premier League transfer window and loan or recruit players from other holders. And then those teams, sort of sorted into rough ability bands, will play in leagues, and you'll be able to go up and down the leagues, and ultimately there'll be a Premier League that will have a winner at the end of the year. And so if anyone's played Championship Manager or Football Manager or FIFA Career Mode or any of those type of references, that's the ultimate expression here, is the ability to sort of recruit players and then manage gameplay and ultimately manage a season, and and hopefully bear the fruits of that labor by moving up the leagues and then ultimately winning.
Gotcha. Very, very interesting.
And I think one of the things that's quite novel and interesting is one, you'll be able to recruit new players to your squad from the academy, as Tom said, expanding out your kind of potential roster. But also you'll be able to train and develop them. So you're kind of investing maybe some of our utility token into training. Maybe you go hard and have a risk of injury, or maybe you kind of go a bit softer, but your kind of chance of improvement is lower. So lots of kind of interesting protocols there in something that will be reflected on chain. So you can well be rewarded in the game for getting those kind of better players who you might choose to sell, you might choose to help you kind of win the cup, whatever it might be. So I think there's kind of what I think is good about this way of recruiting and developing players, building teams, the tactical depth, winning the leagues, is it gives people different ways to play. If you're me, who spends their entire life trying to optimize things whenever I play a strategy game, so much so that I actually no longer enjoy them because I get obsessed with doing it the exact right way. You'll be tactically doing your teams, and you'll be playing the kind of manager role, the Jose Mourinho or Alex Ferguson kind of role. Or maybe you're kind of more of an agent and you're going to be creating and buying and selling players, developing them, training them, selling them on the market, loaning them to others, Again, big hat tip to projects like Critters that I think really have been strong innovators in the use of loan mechanics for NFTs. So again, another great thing of NFTs, right? We're all building on one another as we kind of get to the next iteration. Or you may well be a stadium owner, and you've kind of minted a Genesis team, which comes with a stadium, and you've decided to kind of sit pretty, and like that GIF says of Stewie and the Thing. Doesn't it feel good to be a landowner? Being able to get some passive income of people playing in your stadium as well, or passive token accrual. So different ways to play. But the critical thing I think we want to get across is depth is important to us. This is not a stake and forget game. This is a, decide how you're going to play, what formation, what tactics, how will you respond to X, what, all of the kind of different things we see in other kind of management simulations, giving you genuine choice and agency. It isn't stake, forget, come back, click again. It's meant to have that kind of strategic element.
Gotcha. That's really, really good to hear. And sort of just pulling on the string just a little more here. Now, you talked about there being, I believe, 1,000 teams, right? So I'm assuming that's going to be so we're going to need to form in the later phase, right? When the Premier League actually begins after the knockout competition, players are going to, or people who are interested, I should say more specifically, are going to need to form, right, teams of 10 players, as you say. It's mentioned in your white paper, that there's going to be stadiums. So how will owning teams, relate to stadiums, and what does the stadium gameplay loop look like? Is it very much a traditional landowner type loop? Tell us more.
Yeah, it's maybe just worth clarifying that there will be a certain number of Genesis teams. They will come with a stadium. So they are special in that sense, and they will be the only stadiums, or indeed biodomes, that exist on Mars. And all games will be played in one of those stadiums, picked at random. So therefore, you could passively earn from other teams playing in your stadium, is what I would say. There will be more teams than the Genesis teams. You may just choose to be a non-Genesis team. The only difference is that you don't get a stadium. So the stadium play is for those who are kind of super passionate about doing that and having their own stadium. Being able to do that and being able to accrue, as Gaffer says in the white paper, he's played enough Monopoly to know that you can't stay at someone's house without paying something. They'll have that, but they won't be limited in terms of teams. But the stadium thing will be a bit more passive. We've definitely been asked in another AMA before about kind of upgrading stadiums and maybe some cool stuff you can do. I'm by the way, every time someone asks me in the community about that, I sort of start to be like, oh my god, it's going to be like kind of theme park or something, and you're going to be able to build it, and I get very excited. I think Adam quite rightfully looks at me and says, let's maybe put that further down the roadmap in terms of what we do, which is completely fair. So yeah, the stadiums are kind of more of a passive way to play. But yeah, you don't have to have a stadium to kind of get the team and so forth. The non-Genesis teams, you'll be able to accrue via our native utility token and so forth, in order to do that.
That's really interesting. It was a question I wanted to jump back to very quickly. I picked up on the commentary around the seasons and winning at the end. Is there any intent to kind of build in who wins, what teams or characters perform well into the story and the lore as the game progresses, or will the gameplay kind of be its own thing, and the core story run a separate course?
Yeah, such a good question, and sort of glad you picked up on the potential there, because I think the idea very much is that the gameplay and the narrative, they sort of they kind of have a relationship with each other. So maybe in the gameplay, a hero emerges or a villain emerges because someone gets sent off in a crucial game, and that ruins a team's chances. You might see that appear in the fiction and vice versa. So in fiction, there might start to be a hero that would emerge because of its their narrative depth and suddenly a player that was in, League 900 and middling left back in a middling team becomes someone that a Premier team might want to sign up because they're for their celebrity status. Almost like teams in the real world that buy players for their shirt sales or something. So I think that there's this amazing opportunity to actually build a narrative alongside the gameplay, which I think in most traditional franchises you do one thing, right? You make a game and then you make a movie, or more commonly, you make a movie and then you might make a bad game out of that. But actually, there's a chance here to sort of have the two kind of speak to each other, and I think that's pretty creatively exciting.
I definitely love to hear it because I totally agree. You have the content being made. It's just building the narrative around it, and I'm certain there's going to be some fun. So, in the white paper as well, you mention play and earn. So, can you explain a little bit about what the team's doing to ensure there is more fun than labor in the game? I did hear earlier you talk about stadiums and micromanagement and how people can go that route, so they can really turn this into a labor of love. But from the fun side, where's the focus? What's being done?
Yeah, so probably two questions there. So the fun side of this is this is something that should be genuinely enjoyable as gameplay, right? You want to kind of get in and you pick your team and you see the kind of victories and winnings, and that's a really critical point in the way the game is designed. As opposed to what I think is often kind of stake and forget, and there's meant to be some depth here. I think also our kind of emphasis on, how do we kind of enhance in the communities around leagues and so forth. So, bringing those people together in the leagues in order that they can discuss and chat about what's going on. I think, fun can exist also in the ecosystem around the game. I know, for example, I'm sure many here who play, whether it's fantasy soccer or American football, as you kind of chat with your friends about it, it's always got that kind of, it's that kind of good fun and so forth talking about it. So when we talk about fun, not labor, it not only is the kind of, the depth that should be interesting to people, particularly interested in this, but it's also that it shouldn't be a huge time suck. So, it should be something that you can check, maybe it's a couple of times a week, maybe it's a little bit more than that, but it's not something that, you're sort of going back every hour to be like, okay, let's do another transaction to change this and that. We've all got lives that we need to live. Mine does entirely seem to be spent on Discord now. So for me, it would be fine, but I don't think I'm necessarily the entire target market. So that's important to us. I think on the play and earn element, the and point is really important here to us. We have observed that many play to earn games end up requiring exponential user growth, and they end up running up, and all of a sudden everybody's earning $1,000 a day from their token, and you're sort of sat there being like, that's it, we're quitting the daily grind, I'm just going to sell my token, and then perhaps maybe unsurprisingly everything collapses. Because I guess if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. And we are very focused on not building a game like that. We love having earning mechanics, right? That is the kind of part of ownership of Web3. I'm constantly surprised every time I play Fortnite why my V-Bucks that I've spent, hundreds of dollars on, I can't sell my skins anywhere else. It sort of drives me up the wall. But I still buy them anyway. But more for me, I guess. For us, that kind of play and element means that we need to put mechanisms in place that, at least for our utility token, it is not a kind of endless earning mechanic. And some of that will be via one will just be kind of time gating around some of the kind of actions. I think we've taken inspiration from Crypto Raiders, in terms of how they've done time gating for recruitment events and so forth, as well as kind of token gating as well. I think that's a kind of good way to kind of manage the economy. I know that I think I managed to win over at least one of the NBA HQ team who interviewed us before this collab by saying I was an OG Crypto Raiders when I bought it on a DM from somebody. Surprisingly, didn't get scammed. But yeah, taking some inspiration from that in terms of that, very much, have a strong belief in a similar philosophy to them, that our utility token should not be a high price. It should be cheap and easy for people to use. I think the more of the earning side will come on the governance token for people, which will be to represent the whole Mars ecosystem, not just the Martian Premier League. This isn't always clear in the white paper, I've discovered, because everyone asked me, because actually that will be airdropped. Much like Raider was in Crypto Raiders, we will airdrop a portion of it to holders as it gets launched. There is some finalization to do that on legals. We are luckily not in America, and we don't have the SEC, and Europe is easier. So it's fine. But we want to do it right. I spend too much of my life doing, I think I've become the team's tax and legal person, bizarrely. So I spend a lot of time talking to our professional services advisors on this. So, kind of doing that. So yeah, that's how we're thinking about kind of managing that, and why we've talked about play and earn. If something is fun, it should be fun independently of the earning element. The earning element is a bonus on top of that, and that can be a little bit through the governance token, and then buying and selling of players. And we're very supportive of people buying and selling.
That's excellent. So it's really a case of what are we building? What is our game? Create that first, make that fun, and then work the token in.
Exactly.
Refreshing. Vigil, I think you had something you wanted to ask, mate.
Yeah, so this is actually pretty cool, and by the way, big respect to the OG Crypto Raiders. I too purchased a bundle of Crypto Raiders over DM. I believe it was the I can't remember now. They had somebody in their project team, who you DM and he'd line up a bundle of Crypto Raiders for you. So mad respect, and and it was a mad rush. It was good times back when DMs were okay. I remember those times. So it's awesome to hear. That
back in my day.
Back. Well, so look, we have a lot of fantasy football fans in the house, a lot of sports fans, a lot of sports collectible fans too in the NFT space, of course, as you know, and a lot of gamers. So you mentioned gaming, which is awesome, and I love that you're talking about the fun. Can you talk us through some of the features that you're building into the gameplay, which will differentiate perhaps the Martian Premier League from other football manager games, perhaps, or your regular fantasy football league, if you will?
Yeah, of course. So look, some of the mechanics, of course, will be relatively similar, in terms of team management and so forth. I do think we're building in quite a lot of tactical depth that people can go into. And the way we would like to think about it is sort of easy to play, hard to master, is the way I would think about it. Much like Zed, where I still am terrible at it. I still have no idea what my horses actually are good at. Despite having them for many months. And every time I breed, my small horses are useless as well. So I'm clearly doing something wrong. But that is kind of part of the philosophy. Easy to play, kind of fun to master in terms of that tactical gameplay. In terms of not only just set the formation, but also what's the style of play? How will you respond to going 1-0 down? Will you kind of shut the shop? 1-0 up, will you play this kind of style? What is the kind of formational changes you might look at? How might a kind of individual player sort of react and sort of play in a sort of slightly different way? So kind of adding that tactical depth, I think, is much more akin to kind of complete off-chain games versus maybe some of the stuff that's currently gone on in terms of that depth. But we also have the opportunity, because we're on Mars, to do something fun. So I know, Eleanor, you were looking up about how many times Mars got hit by asteroids and external events as such. And we do want to incorporate a number of kind of external possibilities in the kind of game that will maybe mix it up for people and add that kind of a bit more random element into the game. And also adding in some, features around kind of chemistry. and so forth. As we like to say, maybe the Martians are, shall we say, they've not necessarily played a lot of football, but they are more acclimatized to Mars, shall we say, without giving too much away.
Just to build on that, I think the question, to read between the lines of the question, football manager games, there's a lot of them, and maybe the mechanics are quite sort of familiar. What's the difference with the MPL, and I think really one of the biggest things for me is the type of community mechanics that you can facilitate with building this all on chain, having people actually own players and teams rather than at the end of the season, all they do is buy, next year's version of the same game. I think actually that could be extremely powerful. And if I look at some of the games in the space that I really admire, I'm a big fan of Wolf Game. The way that that at the moment that the alpha game of Wolf Game is very simple, that the actual what you can actually do is quite rudimentary, but there's all this community that's sprung up around that alpha game, around the different packs, and quite inspired by that really, because I think you can only really do that with the type of ownership that Web3 enables. And wouldn't it be fun to sort of turn quite a traditional game on its head, football manager game, but have that built in a way where people feel genuine ownership over their players and their teams. And so yeah, I'm sort of excited about that sort of lens and that sort of flip on the traditional model, as much as anything innovative that we can do in the gameplay, which I think there are a couple too.
There is a question that we had to ask, which I think ties in well here, so I'm going to bring it forward. You're talking about community ownership of assets over time, and one of the things we see in projects is how value of assets is managed by projects. So in your white paper, there's talk about making player trades at the right time, and being efficient with your players by making those trades. So with player value going up and down over time, which would be driving the trades that people want to make, can you dig into that process a little bit for us? What are the factors that you guys are considering? What are the variables around how the meta is kept fresh without changing people's assets? So how will balance be handled? I hope that can be summarized effectively, but you get what I'm getting.
No, it's a great question. I feel like having played, God, I seem to play a lot of games. Having played things like League of Legends and so forth for so long, I obviously think that I must know better balancing than the team, as I constantly complain about it. But yeah, no, you're right. It's a really important point for us, and probably two things. One is, people will need to make trades, as although our Genesis characters, the intention is for them to be eternal, as it were. New players recruited, that might be Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3. The intention is for them to, maybe have a date they have to hang up their boots, as they kind of, reach the retirement age, as it were, and their skills sort of go into decline. So there'll be kind of natural trades that'll be occurring. But you're right about this balance element. And, we also know that football changes a lot in the kind of real world. We know that if we go back kind of, to the kind of era when Jose Mourinho was a kind of world-class manager, it was very much a certain style of defensive play. And we know that isn't the way it plays now, with a much more pressing style. And I think that as we think about, if you think about the absolute core of the game, its mechanics and, all kind of management simulations are a massive spreadsheet at the back end that has a bunch of probabilistic stuff that's going on, and you are trying to improve, you're trying to do the right things to improve your probability. We know we'll need to keep that fresh in terms of seeing what kind of tactics maybe have an over bias success in the kind of engine and so forth, and making changes season to season in terms of doing that. We don't necessarily want, we're not going to, what we're not going to do is necessarily kind of reveal every single thing that somebody can kind of find out. But, we want to make sure that not only are we kind of refreshing that in the way that metas do get refreshed in every game, to keep it fresh and different styles and so forth kind of come to the forefront in a way that maybe they weren't a prior season ago, but also, kind of adding, over time, I think, Adam, you obviously talk consistently and rightly that we are building simple systems that we will add complexity to over time. So, the meta will evolve as we increasingly add complexity, further and further complexity into the game. But it's a really good question, Mick. It's like super good question. We have to be mindful of the meta that it doesn't get stale. And, as kind of, I guess, game designers, that is something we'll sort of manage on a season to season basis, sort of looking at the data, speaking with the community, and kind of making adjustments as needed to keep it fresh and keep managers guessing.
It's
I
definitely
like that. Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm beginning to see the crypto raiders influences here. Mick, are you beginning to see it? They got the dual token model, right? With Footy and their governance token. They've got a limited lifespan of players recruit. I assume there's going to be recruitment of new players further down the track potentially. Maybe I'm not going to put the team on the spot here. Yeah.
There will be. I don't. We've been inspired by a number of things. Crypto Raiders is definitely one of the number ones. DeFi Kingdoms, Critters, Gala Games have all been big inspirations to us. And again, I think it speaks to Web3, which is we are all building on one another and building together. And I think that's a really important element. And, we would be absolutely remiss to not hat tip to the innovators that have come before and are doing different things to us for sure, but have laid the foundations for what I think are genuinely excellent products and teams in all of those spaces.
No, you got it. And I'm a little interested to know a little more about the lifespan of a player and how this might work. So, in your white paper, not everything sounds too rosy in the Martian Premier League. You've alluded to Eleanor talking about how often what was it, objects hit the surface of Mars. Can you explain perhaps a little more, anyone in the team, about injuries? I think injuries are mentioned in the white paper, and sort of what that means to your player and perhaps their ability to perform.
Yeah, for sure. I think that and I know Tom and Eleanor may be a bit quiet. It's currently, I think, nearly 1:30 in the morning where they are, as they're both in Copenhagen today. But having injured will effectively affect your kind of rating, in the game, or you may not be able to play. And we were, there's still some finalization here, so we're not promising anything at this point, but there are trade-offs. For example, you'll see in the white paper, can you kind of boost your stats temporarily, for example, in order to play, but that probably comes with a kind of greater risk, for example, of end up being injured. Maybe you take the wrong concoction of drugs or something that is driving that performance improvement on Mars. So I think that's a sort of important element, and it also is important from a meta perspective, because teams have to cope with injuries, and that means you may need to think about a change to the way you play that is better for the team you actually have available to you at a given time. So very much kind of thinking about that. We also talk in the white paper, sort of picking up on the point Eleanor raised around asteroids, is external events. We don't think the Martian Premier League sort of exists in its own independent, I think as Tom talked about as well, in its own independent ecosystem. It is interacting with the whole of the Mars universe and whatever might be going on within it, which may influence the way games are played or things that might happen in the game and so forth. So the Martian Premier League is is much influenced by the whole Mars universe as anything else. And we even talk about using one way you might be able to use our utility token is to maybe give your team some resilience to those external events. So lots of kind of potentially interesting things. And we've also got some fun traits, and you'll sort of see us talking about quirks of characters. Maybe the vegans are perform slightly better during January, for example, during Veganuary, and a number of other kind of fun things to kind of give really try and give players a bit of personality.
I love hearing it. Look, I just want to thank you all for the responses so far. It's been a fun discussion, and we're getting a great deal of information about the world and the game. It's been fantastic. But 1 a.m. I know what that's like. Our NFT hours normally run in Australia from 10 p.m. through to 4 a.m. in the morning. So painful daily grind. For the spaces now, I wanted to kind of bring us a little bit to a close on our questions and open it up to the wider community. If anyone has anything they want to ask the MPL team, please start to think about that. One final question for you guys, for the team, just while we give everyone a chance to think of some questions. What is your sentiment on the NFT market at the moment? How do you think we're going?
Do you want to start, maybe, Tom?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question, and obviously something that we're quite keenly aware of, being 7 days before launching into it. My impression is there have been a couple of high-profile projects that have not gone so well, and that's not been so good for the credibility of the space in general. And I think you combine that with the natural bear and bull cycles that we're going to go through as something as new as this. I think we might just be at the moment in a little bit of an extended bull market where people are a little bit more circumspect about what they're minting. In actual fact, I don't think that's a bad thing for the long-term health of what we're doing here. And my hope is actually the cream will rise to the top in markets like this, where perhaps people are being a little bit more watchful over the type of projects and the type of teams that are being launched, and only really choosing one a week rather than one an hour to mint and go into, and that's no bad thing, albeit it puts a bit of pressure on a team that is launching into the market. So yes, I'm sure there have been easier times to launch, and there have been more activity daily than there has been at the moment, but I'm still very bullish on the technology and very bullish on the space in general. So despite the sort of cycles that you go through, no real change in general optimism for me anyway.
I tend to agree with your sentiment as well. Cream rising to the top does feel like the way the market's heading at the moment. We are getting fussier as a group, even as volume finds its way in. So it's really good to hear your sentiment there. I think it's quite accurate. So now, do we have any questions? If anyone has their hand up, Poop, if you'd be so kind to bring them to the top, that'd be great.
You got it. If anyone has any questions, come on up. If not, that conversation was A+. Thank you, fellas.
No worries. There was one more question that we did want to ask. Just one final little soft closer. Being Australian, we just like to share the culture, so to speak. So we wanted to ask you as the team, could you tell us, a critical Australiana question, what is a slab?
Well, I think I know this.
Go for it.
Is it a cake?
Oh, what? Sorry?
Is it a sort of cake?
No, there is I'm sure some people that would call the base of a cake a slab. Any other attempt?
The first thing I thought of, and maybe this is bad, but I thought like when you get like a kind of massive pack of beer, like would you call that like a slab?
Oh, yeah.
You got it.
Right.
Well
I think that's
done.
right.
Okay.
Nicely done.
Do you know what it is?
You got it.
I think I haven't had supper, so my mind was on cake.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to getting through Mint and maybe having a slab of beer as part of celebration. So
Yeah, set up.
that'll be absolutely well deserved. So I think that is a wrap for today. A very big thank you once again to the team from the Martian Premier League for coming out, going live, launching in a week's time. Make sure you check them out, Martian P League on Twitter. Once again, very big thank you to the entire team, Oriel or Corey, Tom, Eleanor, and Adam. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's been awesome. It's been a great hour and a bit. So as always, take care. And I think that's a wrap. We'll see y'all next time.
thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for listening.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye now.